In case you missed it, here's a Sports Animal Rewind.
Let's talk college football. It's time for the Sports Page Summer of College Football, presented by Buddy Gregg RVs and Motorhomes, our daily preview of teams and conferences around the country for the upcoming college football season. Find Buddy Gregg RVs and Motorhomes on their Facebook page, their website at buddygregg.com, and follow them on Twitter at Buddy Gregg RVs. Now let's take a look at the Vanderbilt Commodores.
Bring in beat writer covering the Vanderbilt Commodores for the Tennessean. You can find him on Twitter at Jeff Lockridge. Jeff Lockridge joins us here on the new Sentinel Sports Page. Hey, Jeff, Vince Ferrara in Knoxville. How you doing, Jeff?
I appreciate you having me on, Vince.
Well, always great to talk to you, Jeff, and get your insights. Let's start out. We'll go position by position on this Vanderbilt team, and we'll start with quarterback. Do you think that the quarterback position is in better shape this year with Austin Carter-Samuels than it was last year with Jordan Rodgers?
Well, that's a difficult question, probably for Austin. I think the answer is no. And it's not because Austin's not a fairly talented guy, but it's because of how much Jordan progressed going into last year and then over the course of last year. Rodgers had really good chemistry, I thought, with Jordan Matthews and Chris Boyd at the receiver spots. And 15 touchdowns versus 5 interceptions. If you can have a 3-1 ratio in that department, then you're taking care of the football. I worry a little bit about Austin in that department. Whether he can have that sort of ratio. I do think he's got some mobility when he gets out of the pocket and can make some things happen. I think he does have to build up that chemistry, and that just comes with time. When he gets that starting spot and starts targeting Matthews and Boyd in double coverage, and Rodgers was completing some tough passes at the end of last year. We're going to need to see that from Austin before we can start putting him in that class.
Jeff Lockridge from the Tennessean joining us for our Vanderbilt preview in 2013. You mentioned Matthews and Boyd. How good of a duo at receiver, the 1-2 punch at receiver, are those two in this league?
I think you can make an argument that it's the top 1-2 punch in the league. It's certainly the top 1-2 punch that Vanderbilt has ever had in its football program. I believe they were in the top 10 in the country last year in terms of receiving tandems, in terms of the numbers that they put up. And I have to go back and check. They may be the only tandem in that top 10 or one of two where both players are returning this season. Over 2,000 yards combined. They caught plenty of highlight reel, ESPN top 10 type of touchdown passes. And then Matthews, we know what he's capable of, and he's at this point a projected first rounder for next year. So I don't know that the tandems get a whole lot better, and I'm going to be interested to see how much these guys can improve over last year. If they actually improve over last year, and Austin can get them the ball in some tight spots, then they're going to have huge years again.
How do you think the run-pass ratio will be with the losses at running back with Zach Stacy? Still some guys back there that have been productive, but how do you see the run-pass ratio with those two level of receivers and Austin Carter-Samuels at quarterback this year?
That's a great question. I'm not sure it changes a whole lot. I believe it was about 60-40 in favor of the run last year. I think they'd love to have a 50-50 split. That will depend largely on Austin and how accurate he can be. The offensive line, on paper at least, has gotten better. Depth-wise, it has certainly gotten better. You really only lose one starter, Ryan Seymour, who's now with the Seahawks. But Wesley Johnson, you're able to move him back out to tackle. They've got some experience now at the center and the guard spots they feel pretty good about, and they've got a class of what will be almost entirely redshirt freshmen that they think really highly of when you look down the road in the future. And some of those guys will get in this season. On the flip side, while the line may be better, like you said, you don't have Zach at running back, and the guy was an absolute workhorse. He was kind of the face of this team for the last couple of years, with his, practice attitude and his game day leadership. And, he's the perfect guy you want out front as the face of your program. And, you get beat up on over the course of 25 carries, and his 26th run will be his best of the game. They don't have anybody like that on this roster right now. But they do have 3 what they feel like are very serviceable guys who are all very different style running backs. When you look at Wesley Tate and Jerron Seymour and Brian Kimbrough, I think it's going to be a by-committee approach, and they're running behind a decent line, like I said. So we'll see how it pans out. I don't know that the percentage changes a whole lot from last year.
Visiting with Jeff Lockridge, who covers the Vanderbilt Commodores for the Tennessean, helping us with our Sports Page Summer College Football preview on the Vanderbilt Commodores. Let's hop over to the defensive side. We'll start at the defensive line. Kind of take us through that position and the guys that they're replacing there.
Yeah, they took a hit on the defensive line in terms of guys lost, but it may also be where they were most impressive in spring practice, which was a little bit of a surprise. They've got some solid young guys there that they feel good about in terms of pass rushing. Real quick, in terms of guys they lost, Rob Lohr and Colt Nichter, they lose both of their defensive tackles. Lohr was a very good player there for a whole lot of years, as a 3-year starter. And then they lose John L. Thomas, at defensive end. Going forward, I think maybe the most interesting storyline is what they do with the kid out of Nashville, Caleb Azubuike, out of McGavick High School here. And he came in certainly as a defensive end, and he has the build of a defensive end, and I think the mindset of one. But they played him a lot of defensive tackle in spring practice. And Franklin and Bob Shute, the defensive coordinator here, have talked about using a good number of sets where they sort of line up like the New York Giants and play 3 defensive ends and 1 defensive tackle and put a guy at the tackle spot who can really rush the passer. So don't be surprised if you see quite a bit of that from Caleb Azubuike. And another guy that will be new on that defensive line who can make an impact is a redshirt freshman named Adam Butler, who was an offensive lineman. Very strong, very powerful guy. He can plug some holes. And then you've got some returning guys like Walker May, who's a veteran at defensive end, and then Kyle Westman, a kid out of Georgia that I think has really come on and will make a name for himself now at the other defensive end.
Let's talk about the linebacking core. Last year, Chase Garnham really seized that Mike linebacker spot. Talk about the group of linebackers this year.
Yeah, it's a decent group. It's been a while since Vanderbilt's had a dominant group of linebackers, and they did have Chris Marr for a while, and he was the face of that defense for really 3-4 years. But if you remember some of the Vandy teams that were not very good from the 90s and early 2000s, they put quite a few linebackers in the NFL and had guys coming through here that really proved themselves on Saturdays. They don't really have one of those linebacking cores right now. They've got, I'll probably go back to the word serviceable guys at that spot, and they've been able to build a little bit of depth. That was a huge concern going into last year. The linebacker spot, they made it through okay. They weren't great against the run, and they did get burned against the run against a couple of teams. Florida certainly comes to mind when they couldn't stop Jeff Driscoll off the quarterback keeper. But Garnham does lead that squad, and he's I think a much improved player in terms of his knowledge of the game. There's not a lot of other names that you're going to recognize on that unit. But I think what they feel good about now is that they've got basically 5-6 guys instead of just 3 that they can rotate into those spots.
Jeff, it looks like there's a lot of experience in the secondary. Talk about the DBs.
Yeah, now the secondary is to me the strength of this defense and can be one of the best secondaries in the SEC. The guys they have coming back, especially on the back end with Kenny Ladler and Javon Marshall at safety, both those guys are essentially now third-year starters, and Kenny Ladler, I think, can be a stud in this league. I think he can rack up some picks, he can get some sacks. He's a hard hitter back there, and then on the cornerback, Andre Howell is no longer kind of an unknown commodity or a secret in this league. I think he emerged last year as maybe Vanderbilt's best starting corner. It looked like it was going to be Trey Wilson. I'm not so sure by the end of the year it wasn't Andre Howell. The other corner spot still up for grabs to a certain degree. They've got quite a few young guys that are going to get some looks at those spots. Stephen Clark is a guy that may end up starting at those spots, but because of their depth in the secondary, I'm not going to be surprised if they show you a lot of nickel packages with 2 linebackers and 5 DBs. on downs where you might not even expect it because they've got a lot of talent back there.
Who are some of the incoming freshmen or newcomers that you think have the best shot to contribute and make an impact possibly immediately for Vanderbilt?
Number one on the list would be Brandon Vandenberg, a JUCO tight end out of California. That is a spot, tight end, where there's plenty of concern going forward, just because the guys that they have at that spot, not only have they not proven themselves, but you got a couple that have switched over from different positions, and are still kind of learning how things go. So Vandenberg could come in with his size. I think he's around 6'6", 270, right in that area. He could come in and start right away if he shows that he's capable of that in fall practice. Another guy who I think we could see slide in there at slot receiver is Jordan Cunningham, the receiver that announced on signing day out of Fort Lauderdale. 6'3", he's got good size, good hands, from what I've seen on tape. Jonathan Krause, I think they're comfortable with him as the slot receiver. He's got a lot of experience, but they're going to rotate some guys in there, and it wouldn't surprise me if Cunningham is one of those guys. Defensively, I'm not sure any true freshmen make a big impact. I think the biggest ones you'll see are the redshirt freshmen like Adam Butler or Stephen Weatherly, guys like that. If there's one that does get on the field, maybe it's Nigel Bowden, a linebacker out of Georgia. Maybe he can get in that second string rotation.
Just a quick word back to the offense and Patton Robinette from Maryville and where, if he's got that second string quarterback position locked up.
I wouldn't say locked up, but I would say that it would take pretty much a collapse from him or something really special from Josh Grady in fall practice for Patton to slip to the 3, because I still think that, he's more of your traditional quarterback kind of guy. He's got a strong arm. They like what they've seen in terms of progress over his time on campus here. And I think the staff still sees him as the probable starter going into next year. So you don't want to drop him to the 3 and then give him a bad shot to his confidence there, unless it's absolutely obvious and necessary. And you never know. I mean, if Austin struggles, Patton could get in this year. We had a situation 2 years ago at Vandy where they stuck with the veteran guy, with Larry Smith, and halfway through the season, Franklin finally came to the fact that this isn't going to work going forward. Jordan Rogers needs to get his chance now. If Austin struggled, it would not stun me to see Patton get in and become the guy this year. But I think they still see him as the guy going forward, and I expect him to be the number 2.
Jeff, preview special teams for us, all the different aspects of special teams for Vandy. Kicking
wise, they like their place kicker. Kerry Spear had a real nice season. I believe, if my memory serves, he was like 20 out of 24 on field goals last year. Yep. And hit every field goal under 40 yards. Hit a couple over 50. It was a big improvement over his sophomore year, when he really couldn't even hold down that job. They went back and forth all season long, and that was a real pain. That was a question we were asking every Monday when we went into the press conference. Who's your kicker this week? And they didn't have an answer. But there was no question Kerry was the guy last year. He's solid on kickoffs. He'll come down and tackle you after he kicks it to you. He's that kind of kid. And they feel good about him at the place kicking spot. They do lose their punter. And they had a pretty good one in Richard Kent. You got a couple of guys kind of fighting for that spot. I think Colby Cook, the one scholarship kid out of the 2, probably ends up kicking the punts, but I think you're still looking at probably a little bit of a fall off from what Richard gave you. And then they're still looking for that Warren Norman type return guy from a few years ago when he took back 3 kickoffs. They don't really have that guy on the roster that I have seen in the return game. They keep thinking, they keep hoping that Brian Kimbrough will be that guy. He's got the speed to be that guy. It's just whether or not he can kind of develop that vision and patience that it takes to be a great kickoff returner.
Jeff Lockridge from the Tennessean joining us for our Vanderbilt preview here on the Sports Page Summer of College Football, and Vince Ferrara. Give me your thoughts on Vanderbilt's schedule in 2013.
It's kind of back and forth. They they go through some stretches where they ought to win 3, 4, 5 in a row, and then they've got a killer stretch through, I believe it's games 7 through 9, where they'll be lucky to get one of those. I look at the schedule, and to me, it's probably unfair to say this to both teams, but I'm not so sure the biggest game of the year isn't the first game of the year. When Ole Miss visits on a Thursday night on ESPN, because we know what they're building down in Ole Miss and the recruiting classes they're getting there now, they expect that team to be much, much better, and you got Bo Wallace, a veteran quarterback down there who can move that offense. And it was a barn burner when Vandy went down to Oxford and won last year to become bowl eligible. So I'm not sure that first game doesn't mean a whole lot in terms of big picture and which of those two teams ends up having the better season. But you get beyond that, Vandy's got Austin Peay, South Carolina, UMass, and UAB, and then Missouri. At South Carolina is really the only game in that stretch where they would be an underdog. So they can, if they beat Ole Miss, they could get through the first half of the schedule, 5-1, maybe at worst. And then you hit the tough stretch: Georgia, at Texas A&M, at Florida. If they could somehow get one of those this year, then I think Vandy's possibly looking at a very big year. If they lose to Ole Miss early and they don't get any of those three, then you may still be looking at a Vandy team that, is around that 6 or 7 win mark and settles for the type of bowl that they've had to settle for the last couple of years with Liberty and Music City, a smaller bowl. If they beat Ole Miss and they get one of those three, they could be moving on up.
What's your best guess as to how it plays out?
I hit the nail on the head last year, and I may be way off this year. I think they probably take a step back, not a very big one, but maybe they go back from an 8-4 regular season to a 7-5, somewhere right around there. I don't think they have any trouble with their non-conference schedule, and I don't think they have any trouble making their third consecutive bowl game, which would be the first time in program history. I'm going to need to see some real progress from Austin Carter-Samuels at quarterback, and probably some progress from the run defense for this team to match or improve on last year's 8 regular season wins and then finishing 9-4. And it's feasible. It's absolutely feasible that they could do that, because this team may have better depth than last year. But so much of it, as you know, goes back to that quarterback spot. If they get great quarterback play, then maybe they get to 8 or 9, even 10 wins again, if something went really magical for them.
Jeff Lockridge covers the Vanderbilt Commodores for the Tennessean. You can follow him on Twitter. It's at Jeff Lockridge, helping us out with our Sports Page Summer College Football preview of the Vanderbilt Commodores today. Jeff, always great to talk to you. Really appreciate your insights and opinions. Thanks so much for the time today, Jeff.
Glad to do it. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. That is Jeff Lockridge from the Tennessean. That's our Sports Page Summer College Football presented by Buddy Gregg RVs and Motor Homes. More talk on Vandy next. New Sentinel Sports Page brought to you by Image Matters on the Sports Animal.